Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Today, what we've got for you is an excellent book by Robert E. Howard that's called Sowers of the Thunder. Sowers of the Thunder is a collection of 4 short stories by Robert E. Howard, or novellas. That's his Crusader Outremer stories. Knights of the Cross, Knights of the Crusades, fighting over in the Middle East, Jerusalem and the Holy Lands. And it's the title of the book. It's the title of one of the stories in there. So we'll be going over the book in general, and more specifically, one of the stories out of this book, which is called Shadow of the Vulture, which I think is one of Howard's best stories. It stacks up with most of his Conan stories, and I would say it's actually superior, the character, the writing in it, to even all of his other stories, his other characters, like Solomon King, King Call. I think it's better than they are. I know that might be heresy, and if you think I'm wrong, please comment in the comment section down below. Let me know why I'm wrong. I would love to hear some counter arguments, and I do read all the comments. So please feel free to let me know why this is not the best non-Conan story out there. But anyway, Sowers of the Thunder. Sowers of the Thunder. It's right here. This is a hardcover first edition of Sowers of the Thunder from 1973. It's got cover art by Roy G. Krenkel. Krenkel actually wrote the introduction to the book, and he does all of the interior artwork. He's an artist. And there are hundreds of these pen and ink sketches in here that are just wonderful, that fill the whole book. They're little inserts that he puts in here to bring the stories to life. Like this one here that I just opened up to on page 100. I love this one in particular. You've got a writer who's coming up to the city gates. This is probably Jerusalem. And he pulls up and he's hailing the guard. And the guard is up here in the top corner looking down on him. And the staging of this is just perfect. He's got the writer in the lower hand corner with the guard in the tower up in the upper hand corner. And it just draws your eye across the page and feeds into the story as it's being written on the page here. It's just great stuff. This particular copy too, he's got good interior cover artwork, and the back cover's got a painting on it as well. And this one is actually signed by Krenkel himself. So it's kind of a special book for me in my library. I really enjoy this one. And on the inside, you've got a plate of the painting. And I think there are 4 or 5 full color plates in here as well. But this is the hard copy, the hardback from 1973. It was also published a number of times in paperback, like this version right here. This is 1979, the first Ace edition. There were other editions, but this is the first Ace edition from 1979. And this one's got a great cover artwork from Esteban Maroto, who did a lot of fantasy artwork himself, pen and ink drawings and paintings. He's a spectacular artist, and I really enjoy this cover. You've got 2 chevaliers, 2 knights, who are confronting each other, a crusader and a Muslim horseman. It's really good stuff, and it's got to be Jerusalem in the background. Kind of the cool thing about this paperback version is it contains all the same interior artwork, all the line pen and ink drawings by Krenkel that are in the hard copy. So that's really cool that they've included those in this edition of the paperback. I'm sure the other ones have it as well. And this paperback edition can be picked up very easily on eBay or Amazon for not much at all. It's very readily available to anyone who would want to read it, and I highly recommend it. It's a great book. So that's the book, and then you've got the story in there that I'd like to talk about in more detail, and that's Shadow of the Vulture, which was written by Robert E. Howard in 1933. He originally tried to have it published in Oriental Stories, and it got rejected. I'm pretty sure that's how that sequence happened. And it got picked up by another pulp magazine called The Magic Carpet, which before looking into this, I'd never heard of The Magic Carpet, but The Magic Carpet published it and at least one other story that's here in this collection, Sowers of the Thunder. And The Shadow of the Vulture actually is a little different. It takes place a little later in the timeline than his other stories in here, which happened in like the 1200s, Siege of Jerusalem. This is actually about the Siege of Venice by Suleiman the Great in the Ottoman Empire in the early 1500s. It's the original Siege of Venice. And his main character is Gottfried von Kalmbach, who is this renegade, or vagabond would probably be the better description, a vagabond German knight. And the story starts off with Gottfried von Kalmbach. He's part of an envoy that has gone over to the Sultan to try to convince the Sultan not to attack Vienna and Austria. And that's right where the book picks up, is the Sultan is calling all these envoys in, which includes von Kalmbach. And he tells them basically, no, I'm not going for that. I am the Sultan of the entire Islamic world. I'm going to crush Vienna and then move on to Europe. And on this date, I'm going to be eating dinner in Vienna. But for your trouble, I'm going to give each of you $200 or 200 gold pieces, and then sends them on his way just to show that he has so much more gold to spend. He can throw it away at these envoys whose lands he's going to crush and then take occupation of. So von Kalmbach takes his 200 gold and all the other envoys, and they depart the palace of Suleiman the Great. And after they left, Suleiman starts thinking that von Kalmbach looked familiar, and then it occurs to him that he remembers where he's seen this renegade vagabond German knight before. He was in a battle years prior, and von Kalmbach was part of a group of knights that charged the presence of Suleiman the Great, attacked his bodyguard, fought their way all the way up to the bodyguard, and then von Kalmbach stabbed him in the shoulder, and then somehow was managed to live and escape out of this. So he realizes his mistake that he's made, that he's let this enemy of Islam, of the Suleiman, leave the palace, and he calls over his Grand Vizier, and he goes, this is unacceptable. You cannot stab the Sultan of the Islamic world in the shoulder and live. Take care of this problem. And the Grand Vizier says, yes, Your Majesty, I will have it taken care of. And then he summons Mikhail Oglu, otherwise known as the Vulture, who is the greatest slayer and assassin in the Ottoman Empire in the service of Suleiman the Magnificent. And the vizier tasks Mikhail Oglu with killing this knight, because whatever you do, this man cannot live. Track him down and slay him. And Mikhail Oglu replies back, it'll be done, and if I don't send you his head, then he has my leave to send you mine. And as soon as Mikhail Oglu utters those words, you know that it's not going to end well for the Vulture, for Mikhail Oglu. It's prophetic, and it's just not going to be a happy ending for Mikhail after he utters those words. They're going to be ironic and come to fruition. And in fact, it does at the end of the story, which I'll get into here in a little bit. But the writing in this story is fantastic. Robert E. Howard really researched it. He wasn't just writing this off the top of the head. He wasn't, pardon the expression, writing out of his butt when he wrote this, just using a general framework of history in order to hang the meat of the story on. He really read this stuff. He knew his history. There are a lot of references to historical figures and place names in here that show you that this was something he was very interested in, which shouldn't be surprising to anybody. And the writing is as good as almost anything in his Conan stories. What I'd like to do is read you the very first paragraph that sets the scene in here. And for me, that's one of Howard's specialties as a fantasy writer, and what makes him such a great fantasy writer is he could, in the space of one paragraph, set a scene more vividly than almost any other fantasy writer could in 2 or 3 pages of writing. He was that concise, he was that powerful in his writing. So let me just give you a sample here of the first paragraph of Shadow the Vulture out of Sowers of the Thunder. And this is where the envoys are. This is Suleiman the Great talking to the vizier about the envoys as they're getting ready to bring him in. Are the dogs dressed and gorged? I, protector of the faithful, then let them crawl into the presence. So they brought the envoys, pallid from months of imprisonment, before the canopied throne of Suleiman the Magnificent, Sultan of Turkey and the mightiest monarch in an age of mighty monarchs. Under the great purple dome of the royal chamber gleamed the throne before which the world trembled. Gold paneled, pearl inlaid, and emperor's wealth in gems was sewn into the silken canopy from which depended a shimmering string of pearls ending a frieze of emeralds which hung like a halo of glory above Suleiman's head. And what a paragraph. It just really sets the book off. It's why I love this story so much. The whole story is written like this. And then you've got Krenkel's great illustrations that just supplement it and bring it to life. So there's a portrait right there of Suleiman the Magnificent, looking very imperious and haughty. And on the next page, we've got the hero of our story, Gottfried von Kalmbach, our vagabond German knight. And then a couple pages later here, we get a nice portrait silhouette of Mikhail Oglu, the vulture, with his vulture wings on the back of his armor. And the reason they call Mikhail Oglu the vulture is because he has pinioned vulture wings on the back of his armor. And as he's riding his steed, his charger, down to run down his foes and kill them with a scimitar, the wind will strike the wings that he has on the back. And the wind will blow the wings out, spread them out, creating a shadow as he descends upon you, which makes him the vulture, which is a nice touch. It's a nice alliterative touch by Howard there. And then, of course, the star of the novel, who actually sort of takes more fame from it than the hero Gottfried von Kalmbach, which is Red Sonja. There's Red Sonja, because this is the story, Shadow the Vulture, which introduces the world to Red Sonja, who later will show up in the Conan stories, with kind of a nice tie-in here with Cimmerian September. But there's Red Sonja, looking all pissed off and haughty, and she's a battle axe through the whole story. She's just a pill to deal with all the time. She's got no respect for von Kalmbach, apparently, and doesn't thank him for saving her life, or vice versa. And the way that they meet in the story is, after von Kalmbach has left, they send Mikhail Oglu after him. Von Kalmbach takes his gold and he says, look, I'm not hanging around with you guys. I'm going over to this village over here, and I'm getting the entire village drunk on my 200 gold pieces, which is exactly what he proceeds to do. He spends all of the Sultan's gold in one night of this giant debauchery, this drunken fit that they have. He gets the whole town drunk, and in the middle of the night, the vulture attacks. He's tracked him down, and while the town is drunk, the vulture and a troop of cavaliers from the Sultan attack and burn the town. Von Kalmbach barely escapes, and he flees out of the town and makes it to Vienna, just as the Sultan's forces are enclosing and encircling the city for the siege of Vienna. And it's there where he then fights wave after wave of the Sultan's forces as they assault the city. And that's pretty much a lot of the rest of the story, is von Kalmbach up on the ramparts defending the city from the Sultan's attacks. And it's written just fantastically. Nobody could write a battle scene or a fight scene like Robert E. Howard. He has no peers. He was the best writer of combat, in my opinion, that anybody in fantasy, or even outside of fantasy, has ever done. And it's on the ramparts where he runs into Red Sonja. The Sultan's forces make a breach. They get over the walls. They gain a foothold up on the top of the ramparts. And Sonja and von Kalmbach come together to push the invaders off of the wall and back into the fields and defeat that attack on the city, which saves the city. So towards the end of the story, after they meet up there, and Red Sonja just is, like I said, it's just a total pill and a battle axe to him. Even though they fought side by side, saved the city, they saved each other's lives, she won't give them the time of day. And then they stave off and stop the final assault on the city. But it takes all of their resources. Their energies are depleted. The whole city is on its last legs. Von Kalmbach has no energy left. He's almost collapsed from this fight. The invaders are in the same state, but they've been repulsed and the city is saved. And von Kalmbach is stumbling off of the ramparts when two traitors who tried to undermine and sap one of the walls and bring the forces of the Sultan in unsuccessfully, they see and recognize von Kalmbach, and they know that the vulture is looking for him, that there's a price on his head. So they decide that they can make up for their failure to let the Sultan into the city by kidnapping von Kalmbach and delivering him to the vulture. So they lead him over in his weakened state. They get him to drink this drugged wine, and then they tie him up, and they're going to let the vulture know that he's there. Except that Sonja was watching, and she sees them lead him off, and she decides to go down and save him. So apparently she feels a little better about him in reality through her actions. Actions speak louder than words, than she was telling him up on the walls and out in the city afterwards. So she kicks in the door of this home where he's being held with these two traitors, and saves him. And then von Kalmbach and Sonja together come up with a plan to take care of the vulture. And they set and bait a trap for the vulture using these two, which successfully draws in Mikhail Oglu. And then they kill him, cut off his head, and send it back to the Sultan in the middle of his victory feast. The Sultan has declared victory over Vienna. He's shown the world that he can attack the city and inflict all this damage. And he's trying to paint this scene that he actually won this battle when everybody knows he didn't. And then this severed head of his greatest assassin shows up at his feet in the middle of this feast. And of course, just wrecks the whole feast and brings down the whole facade that this was some type of victory for Suleiman the Magnificent. And it's just an excellent story. It's one of those stories that actually ends on an upbeat message here out of the Sowers of the Thunder, where the other ones kind of have more tragic endings to them. But it's great stuff. It's wonderful writing. If you haven't read Howard's Crusader Outremer stories, I highly recommend going out and picking up the Ace paperback edition. Like I said, it's very easy to get a hold of. It's got all that great crinkle art in it. And enjoy the hell out of it. It's a fantastic book. And then put in the comments and let me know what you think about it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about what you think about Robert E. Howard's Tales of the Crusader Knights. But it didn't end there. You've got those paperback and hardcover editions of Sowers of the Thunder and The Vulture. And then The Vulture makes it into issue 22 of Conan in the comic books. And right here we've got The Shadow of the Vulture. And they convert Red Sonja into a comic book character for Conan and bring Conan and rewrite Conan. Roy Thomas rewrites it as a Conan story. He converts it. And you've got the Vulture up here with his wings spread out over this pending combat with Conan. Sonja's not on the cover here, but she makes an appearance in here. It's the first appearance of Red Sonja in the comics. You think in issue 22. So it says Shadow of the Vulture. You've got this great Barry Windsor Smith artwork in here. And then you open it up, and instead, it's a reprinting of Conan #1 by Barry Windsor Smith. And you get this apology right here from Marvel and the editors, which says, Apologia. Due to circumstances beyond our or even Crom's control, we are unable to bring you the Conan story originally scheduled for this issue and proclaimed on our cover. See the full-length sad saga on this month's Hyborian Age. Meanwhile, for those countless multitudes who may have missed it, the first time around, we represent our epic-making premiere issue. So what happened is, when you go and read the Hyborian Age and the notes in here, is that Barry Windsor Smith apparently lost in the mail the work, the original couple weeks' work on this issue that was supposed to go to the printing press. Now, Barry Windsor Smith, you've got to understand, he was notorious for not being able to meet deadlines and being very difficult to work with. Now, his artwork was beautiful. It was highly detailed. I'm sure it took him a long time to create this artwork. But I think the lost in the mail is right up there with my dog ate it. I don't think he had it done. This was just their explanation for it. And so they came up with it got lost in the mail. However, not to fear, because next month in issue number 23, they get the artwork finished by Barry Windsor Smith and they publish it in here. And it's just fantastic. It's great stuff. Here you got the Vulture with his wings on his back, confronting Conan. Here's the introduction page, the first splash page. Just beautiful artwork. Look at this. This is Barry Windsor Smith at the height of his powers. This isn't Barry Windsor Smith in issue 1, which is still great. But back in there in issues like 1 through about 6 to 7, he's still feeling out. He's a very young artist. He's still feeling out his style. He's still maturing as an artist. This is Barry Windsor Smith, fully matured, at the height of his powers, just giving you just fantastic artwork here to outline the story. And it's in this story where you get to meet Red Sonja. Here's a panel of her right there. Except that they call her, Conan calls her Red Sonja, like it's spelled in the book by Howard with a Y. But then Red Sonja seems to insist on it, her name being Red Sonja with a J. And she yells at him in here, it's not Red Sonja, it's Red Sonja. Which I have no idea why Roy Thomas decided to change the name from Red Sonja to Red Sonja. And if anybody has an idea of what happened in there or an explanation for it, again, put it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. So that's issue number 23. It's a self-contained issue, start to finish, that mirrors the story, Shadow of the Vulture and Sowers of the Thunder. And then kind of as a follow-on to that, here you've got Red Sonja in the next issue, 24, which is the first full appearance of Red Sonja. And look at that artwork. Look at that cover. Look at the vibrant colors that are on that cover. And compare that to my video of the new Titan Comics 1 and 2, the colors they use in there. And again, it's not Titan Comics' fault. It's just the nature of the business these days. They can't modernly produce these bright, vibrant colors like they can, or they could back in these days. And this is Barry Windsor Smith's last work on Conan the Barbarian for Marvel Comics in the initial run. It's number 24. And I got this comic probably at least 20 years ago. It's been at least a couple of decades. I don't even remember where I got this. It's sealed in archival quality, a comic book cover with a nice solid backer. I don't think I've ever opened this. I don't think I've ever opened this. I don't think I've ever read it. I think my intention was, this is almost a pristine copy. It's got to be a 9 if you had it graded at least. My intention was to have this copy and keep it and then get another copy as a reading copy, which I haven't done. So this is it. At a future video here, sometime here in September, before Sumerian September expires, I'm going to open this thing, I'm going to go through it, and I expect it to be absolutely spectacular. I'm thinking this is just going to be some of the best artwork, comic book artwork that you or I have ever seen. So please tune in for that one. But that's it. That's Sowers of the Thunder here with the hardback, hardcover. You've got the paperbacks. Great issue, great collection of Robert E. Howard stories. It's one of my favorite of all times. Shadow the Vulture, I think, is just a fantastic story. It stacks up with anything. There's only one other non-Conan Robert E. Howard story that I like as well, and that's contained in a book called Marches of Valhalla, and I'll go over that one sometime here in the future as well. But that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I've gone on long enough, I think, about the Sowers of the Thunder and Shadow the Vulture. I hope you enjoyed it. So take care, be safe, and hopefully I will be seeing you in the future.